morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where I am truly sorry to be the bearer of bad news for some of you, and that's that Margot Robbie apparently got married yesterday. Who did she marry? Well, she married a guy named Tom Ackerley from the UK, who was a third assistant director on one of her earlier films, Sweet Francaise from 2013. So as you can see, it pays to go up and talk to the actress on set. At that point, she wasn't the lead. She wasn't like a big deal actress at that time. So it doesn't hurt to go up and strike up a conversation, because you could not only end up marrying that actress, but you could also end up going into business with her. Yes, Margot Robbie is not only Mrs. Tom Ackerley, but he's now going to produce her movies. Kind of a flip scenario of what happens with Zack Snyder and Christopher Nolan, where their wives produce their films. Is this for Margot Robbie to gain more power over the movies that she's making? Maybe she feels that this is the only person she can trust, or maybe Tom Ackerley just needs to be employed, because this is quite the career jump for him. He's going from second, third assistant director, that's as high as he's gotten in showbiz, to suddenly being a major producer. Like, he's not an associate producer or an executive producer. He's producing these movies for his now wife. Now, there are two of them that he's working on. One is Terminal, and this is a film that's already showed some footage at film festivals in an effort to get foreign distribution. That's one way that movies will earn money. They'll let their U.S. distribution wait, because that's really the engine that drives the film's release. But they'll sell off the foreign distribution rights in exchange for money up front. They'll show a little bit of footage, and those distributors will get to distribute the films in smaller countries where the box office isn't quite so crucial and the ad campaign isn't quite so crucial, and therefore a movie can quickly raise money. And also, if they sell off a lot of foreign rights, it looks really good to a potential U.S. distributor, right? So anyway, but from what I heard, Terminal, while it was shown, it's not a big buzzworthy film. It's like, Simon Pegg is in it. It's about like these two criminals who are hired to do a job, and Margot Robbie starts following them around, and she may or may not be the person who hired them. It's one of those like indie films about like people in crime, and it's very hip, right? Like Grosse Pointe Blank, like stuff like that. Although I think Grosse Pointe Blank was a little bit lighter in tone. But you know the type of movie I'm talking about, right? Some often get a cult fan base, but usually don't do that well at the box office. But Margot Robbie, she's got the box office down pat. Now she's looking for to be taken seriously. So I think Terminal is one of those films. And then I think the even better one is the Tonya Harding story called Right Now I Tonya. And they just cast actually Sebastian Stan in that film. Margot and Tom did. They cast him. And I don't know. I'm coming around a little bit to Sebastian Stan. I thought he did a nice job in as the Winter Soldier in Civil War, but I still think he's kind of weak at the box office. But I think also at the same time, they want to make sure that Margot Robbie is the star of her own movie. But it's very interesting. You see these kind of marriages a lot in Hollywood. You wonder, since Margot Robbie is supposed to be this cheesecake actress who appeals very much so to male moviegoers, will being married hurt her? Well, it hasn't hurt Scarlett Johansson, who was, of course, originally married to Ryan Reynolds. Then they got divorced after she discovered that he was in the same city as her and did not tell her. So bad. But she ended up marrying a French advertising executive who actually has his own advertising agency in France. They split their time, I believe, between, I think, New York and Paris, which makes sense because New York is such a strong advertising center as well. But they even have a daughter, and I think Scarlett Johansson's career has never been hotter. And then Jessica Alba, interestingly enough, also married someone that she met on set, Cash Warren on Fantastic Four, who at the time was Tim Story's assistant. And interestingly, he actually went on to be a producer. She helped establish him. He stayed in the movie business, where Jessica Alba actually has largely gone on to be have her own brand of products, for skincare and taking care of the family and baby care. She's actually makes quite a bit of money doing that. That's what I think. She's like such a big success story that's why you see Gwyneth Paltrow and Blake Lively trying to follow suit, but no one's as successful as Jessica Alba. She's quite the businesswoman. But anyway, Margot Robbie's hoping to be quite the businesswoman in the movie industry, with her husband clearly helping her. I hope this works out for her. I hope that he's just an undiscovered genius and really knows what he's doing. I think that a lot of times women, particularly in Hollywood and big business, will find someone and try to help because I think it can be very contentious when someone in the relationship is much more successful than the other person, especially if you are working in the same business. So they'll try to help their husband, and then it just goes horribly wrong. Like Joan London, for instance, this is a famous old story. Joan London is used to be a very famous journalist, and she's one of the first people who had to pay a significant amount of spousal support to her husband, for decades. It had gone the other way, where guys were the ones who had to pay an incredible amount of money to spousal support to wives. And Joan London was one of those establishing cases that showed, you want equal opportunity? Well, that means equal opportunity to have to give most of your money to your spouse. Although, wait for my La La Land review later today, where I talk about why maybe 50-50 community property laws make sense. So anyway, I'm very curious what your thoughts are on Margot Robbie's newfound marital status and what she's doing with her career and how she's mixing personal with business. And I wish her the best of luck. I hope it works out. I think that Tonya Harding movie is brilliant. Okay. I hope that Tom Ackerley can tell her not to. Where was he when David Ayer was potentially? Although I think that was Warner Brothers and she had no choice in that. All right. So anyway, the second story of the day is that Dick Van Dyke is going to appear in Mary Poppins Returns. And this is all part of it was revealed in a really wonderful article in the Hollywood Reporter. And I will put a link down below to it in the video description. I have it already put down here, so I will remember. I apologize. But it's a really good article in the Hollywood Reporter, which debuted yesterday. It's a slow news period, so they did this wonderful in-depth piece on actors in their 90s who are still working in Hollywood. And it focuses on Dick Van Dyke, Betty White, Jerry Lewis, Don Rickles, Cloris Leachman. It talks about even though there's rampant ageism in Hollywood, these people have continued to get work and, how they're able to remain active in the industry, not only in an industry that's betting against them and doesn't want older people, but also because they're in their 90s. So it's a great story. So anyway, but Dick Van Dyke, kind of like, when you're talking to someone who's like older, like your grandpa or something, and all of a sudden they'll just like blurt something out that's really not appropriate. It's just really, it's just shocking and how it goes against like politeness, and you're just like, whoa, do you either not care or you've just, this is like you're still stuck in a bygone era, right? So this is what Dick Van Dyke did. He's like, oh, I'm so excited to be in Mary Poppins Returns. It's got, what a cast. It's got Meryl Streep, Angela Lansbury. And I'm like, oh, is Angela Lansbury going to be older Mrs. Banks? Because she'd actually be quite well cast as that. And then he goes, and that guy from Hamilton. I was like, that guy from Hamilton. And the Hollywood Reporter was forced to put in parentheses Lin Manuel Miranda, being like, that's who he's referring to. And it's like, Dick Van Dyke, I mean, is he too old to bother to find out who it is? He's like, oh, Meryl Streep and Angela Lansbury are my contemporaries to some degree. But this guy, I don't pay him that much attention to what's happening. But he knows what Hamilton is, right? I guess that's how Disney sold it to him. Maybe Dick Van Dyke was like, why isn't Bert still around and the co-star of the film? And they're like, this guy's from Hamilton. And he's like, whatever. But I just thought it was so disrespectful to Lin Manuel Miranda. I mean, I know he didn't deliver with Moana, but still, Hamilton is like a pop culture icon at this point. It's like single-handedly, well, we'll see, but it seems to be single-handedly changing the direction of Broadway and diversity, and also allowing people of different backgrounds to feel some kind of ownership to American history finally, right? And to relate to it. It's like a really important musical. And for him just to be that guy from Hamilton, I go back and forth on Lin Manuel Miranda. I have great respect for him as an artist, but I'm not a huge fan of his work. I loved him on Saturday Night Live. But I would certainly not just refer to him as that guy from Hamilton. I was just shocked. So anyway, I was like, ooh, Dick Van Dyke, why do you do it? Somebody, I don't know why the PR people, this is why you have to watch, PR departments should watch people like hawks. But anyway, that's why they're always sitting next to people usually, or they should be when they're doing interviews. So anyway, this raises the question, will Julie Andrews show up in Mary Poppins Returns? She, of course, can no longer sing. Quite tragic. I believe she was injured during some surgery, and they damaged her vocal cords. So bad. I hope she sued that doctor like crazy. But anyway, but is there a place for her in the film? Because, of course, Emily Blunt is playing Mary Poppins. And I saw some coverage of this, and someone was like, well, Emily Blunt looks nothing like Julie Andrews. And I'm like, I think she looks exactly like Julie Andrews. I did a mock-up of it, as you can see, and I think she's an excellent stand-in. It's kind of ridiculous, actually. But if I were Disney, and the fact that Julie Andrews is still alive, and if you're going to have Dick Van Dyke in there, I don't see how you can't have Julie Andrews in a cameo. It would be kind of super disrespectful, unless like she doesn't want to do it. But then I'd be like, come on, don't. Then I'd be like, Julie Andrews, don't disrespect my sequel. So I hope it works out. But I thought that was interesting, and I'd be curious to see what you think of how Dick Van Dyke handled that. I'm glad he's going to be in the new Mary Poppins. He's so wonderful in the original film. And if you're going to watch Mary Poppins, watch Saving Mr. Banks first, and then watch Mary Poppins. It'll give you a better appreciation and understanding of what the film's really supposed to be about. And then also I'm curious to what you think of that article in the Hollywood Reporter. I hope you will go check that out. All right, so then the third story of the day is I got this neat little press release about a film, a small horror film that's going to debut at Sundance in 2017 in the midnight category. But what's special about this is it's a horror anthology featuring shorts all directed by women, and it's called XX. Get it? You know, for XX chromosomes. And I'm like, ugh, eye roll, barf. But still, this is very interesting. And that, you know, usually I wouldn't mention such a small film, but I think that this is, I'll tell you why I think this is interesting. So anyway, again, it premieres at Sundance in 2017. That's good. It gives us some legitimacy. And it will also debut in theaters and on demand on February 17th. But even if nobody watches this, what's really good about it is that you better believe is there's such a demand for female directors that anybody, any producer, like particularly the franchises, is going to be combing over this movie being like, do you have someone for me here? Like this sounds to me like the perfect project to get someone on like Kevin Feige's radar, right? And they haven't announced who's going to be directing Captain Marvel yet. I don't know if you take somebody this green. These are a lot of mostly first-time directors, but still, this is the kind of thing that gets you started, and especially because it's like, oh, it's an all-female, but it's horror, so it's like a genre. Usually, when women get together and make a movie, it's like about women, right? So it just seems too niche. But this is very smart for all these women involved. I'm very impressed, and it has again the Sundance name associated with it. And this still that I've included here doesn't look half bad, right? I mean, it actually looks like a legitimate horror film. It looks attractive. It's well framed. You know, you feel like you could give a film to that person and not be absolutely horrified with what you get back. So these are who are directing. That is from a director named Roxanne Benjamin. That's up there. She's pretty new to the game. But they also have Karen Kusama from Girl Fight. Remember Girl Fight, the film that gave us Michelle Rodriguez? Think of how far Michelle Rodriguez's career has gone, and that Karen Kusama is still kind of stuck in the beginning stages. Like she hasn't been really able to go that far. But I'm glad she's still trying. Then also Annie Clark, who is the musician, that's the actual name of the musician St. Vincent, is making her directorial debut. And she's also well known for being Cara Delevingne's girlfriend. And then there's another director here, Javanka Vukovic, who was a former editor of Rue Morgue magazine, which is a Canadian horror magazine. And then the whole thing is going to be tied together by animation from an award-winning animator whose work it's not something that I've ever heard of, named Sofia Carrillo. But you got to start somewhere. So I think this sounds pretty good. And I don't think a lot of people are going to see it outside of like diehard horror fans. I will bet you that this makes the rounds big time with studio executives and producers. And it's very smart. It should. I would certainly, if I were a producer, I'd tell my assistant to get me a copy of that. I probably wouldn't travel out of my way to go and watch it, but it's something that I would be like fast forwarding through at my desk. And if I saw something that was really good, I'd stop and I'd check it out and be like, okay, bring this person in. That's a lot of times how it works. All right, so those are the three stories of the day. Now, speaking of Hollywood and how it works, I have a very good question from HawkTag, with a capital K. But HawkTag had a question about one of the stories from yesterday, and that was Felicity Jones's salary on Rogue One. So HawkTag says, hey Grace, I've been watching Beyond the Trailer since 2009, when you only had one channel and interviewed people coming out of the theater with, under the Indie Mogul banner. Oh, that's so nice of you. I really appreciate that. Thanks for sticking with me. So HawkT says, anyway, I have a question, and that is, why are the salaries of the Rogue One cast members so low? Basically, just to remind you of what happened yesterday, Felicity Jones, because she was coming off of an Oscar nomination, got a seven-figure salary, which means she got at least $1 million, whereas everybody else got mid-six figures. So that means they got about $500,000 a piece. And they said definitely mid, not high six. So that's anywhere from, I'd say, like four to 600 maybe. for the film. So Hawk T wants to know why there's such a disparity. So Hawk T says, actors like Johnny Depp and Robert Downey Jr. regularly ask for $20 million to star in a movie. And Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence both got huge paychecks for Passengers. And while their names will likely drive a lot of box office conversation, I don't think they will make nearly as much money back as Disney will with Rogue One, being expected to open with more than half of the full worldwide haul of some of the movies that Johnny Depp was paid 8 figures for. So the main cast of Rogue One aren't mainstream movie stars, but I would still expect them, I like this, to get paid more than the main cast of The Big Bang Theory makes for every episode. The main players on The Big Bang Theory get paid $1 million an episode, like Jim Parsons, Johnny Galecki, and Kaylee Cuoco. So anyway, Hawk T says, thanks for taking the time to read this, Grace, and I hope you have time to answer it on Morning Movie News one of these days. Great question, and I'm impressed that you know your salaries so well. All right, so anyway, the reason this works is that, you know how all the time I tell you that the squeaky wheel gets the grease? Well, it's the same goes for salary negotiations, right? But one of the dark secrets of Hollywood is that you actually don't get paid very much until you become a leading actor. Like, for instance, when Scarlett Johansson was starting out, there's like a story where she was like, they wanted her, I think it was like, I'm not sure, I think maybe Black Dahlia or something. And she really didn't want to do it because she felt the money was too low. They wanted to pay like $200,000. So her agents come to her and it's a movie like that. So they go, do you want to be in the Black Dahlia or something? It's $200,000 is the salary. And she's like, are you kidding me? Like, I have some kind of a career going. That's insulting. So instead of her agents being like, okay, well, we'll go back and ask for more, because they package movies these days, and I think they also represented Keira Knightley, they said, this story was a while ago, but they said, we're just going to give it to Keira Knightley then, because we want to make sure that our agency gets the job, and we want to get the commission, so we're just going to put Keira Knightley in there. So they kind of just basically strong-armed Scarlett Johansson, and we're like, look, you can take the role or not, but someone's doing it for $200,000, and it's either going to be you or Keira Knightley. I think Scarlett Johansson actually ended up taking it because she just wanted to get the work and the publicity for being in the movie. You might recall the Black Dahlia got a lot of attention at the time because it was, such an infamous story, but then, of course, the movie ended up being horrible. But anyway, really fascinating, and that kind of like strong-arming tactics that happen. And that's one of the downsides of agencies being in control of films these days, in large part with packaging. And also, there's like, I forget where it was, but there are just some funny gags. Like, I think it was Paul Reiser. Like, there's a gag, like, he's sitting with his agent, and his agent is pitching him for something. And then Paul Reiser can hear the agent go, oh, you don't like him? Well, how about this person? And Paul Reiser's like, what? Like, are you going to fight for me for the role? But agents often have several clients that are similar, and they'll just go through the Rolodex just to make sure that they get the job again for their agency. So it's tough. So I think that unless you're somebody who sells tickets, you're not going to make particularly like a lot of money. I would actually imagine that for Donnie Yen in the United States and Diego Luna, these people probably get paid much more in their home countries. Ben Mendelsohn, I think that mid-six figures was probably very high for them. I think that was actually a good payday. Maybe they'll do better after being in Rogue One, and that might be one of the reasons that they were fine with it. They're like, this is a stepping stone. And, I told you another great piece of advice is sign the best deal that you can at the time that you're signing it. It might not be the best deal ever, but you need to realize the reality of your situation, and your job is just to take a step forward, get to the next step. And I'm sure that they're all going to be worth more money post Rogue One. Now also, Rogue One is going to make a lot of money because it's a Star Wars movie, right? And so I think that's another situation. Like Passengers really need star power. And there might be some chance that even with the bad reviews, Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence are so popular that they might be able to help that movie do pretty well anyway. We'll see what its box office is like, particularly overseas. So that's why they get paid so much money. But Rogue One, it's kind of like if Diego Luna says, I want more money, they're going to be like, let's just go find another Latino actor, right? Let's just go find somebody else. We're not going to negotiate with you, Diego Luna. So, aggressively. I'm sure they'll be polite about it. But that could be the situation. Maybe Donnie Yen could have held out for a little bit more because they really want the Chinese market. But like Jiang Wen would be like, oh, hot damn, I'm so excited. Thank you. And Ben Mendelsohn, such an important part of Rogue One, I don't know if he could have negotiated for much more. I think, like, Benicio del Toro, it's like, what do you have to negotiate with? Benicio del Toro was an Oscar winner. He's going to get paid more. So it's like, really, again, you make the best deal you can at the time. And none of these actors in Rogue One can point to really none of them can point to anything where they've had a huge box office success, and that's going to hurt them at the negotiating table. And the Big Bang Theory actors, it's important to point out, they didn't make a lot of money when they started, but when the show starts to do so well, and you can't imagine the show without those actors, and Friends is responsible for really doing this because the actors all banded together to make sure they got paid a lot of money. You band together and you say, well, if you don't raise all of our salaries, we're going to leave. And Big Bang Theory can't really exist without its main leads, so that's why they get paid so much. Also, Big Bang Theory is probably the most successful sitcom on the air right now, and really the only one that operates ratings-wise and advertising-wise like an old-school sitcom. You know, TV ratings have gone down significantly because there's so many more channels now. So Big Bang Theory brings in so much money that just think about how much money it must be bringing in, that it's totally worth it to CBS to pay 3 of its stars $1 million an episode. That's $3 million just starting base before you layer on all the other expenses, and it's still worth it. That's how much money Big Bang Theory is bringing in. Also, you don't forget when it airs and reruns. In syndication, that is a huge cash cow. So it's just a money machine. Also, you might recall that in 2.5 Men, tons of money. They were just throwing money. And that's all from Chuck Lorre. I think probably the most successful TV producer of sitcoms in the business right now. So anyway, I hope that was illuminating to you, Hawk Tag. Thank you so much for your fantastic question. Thank you everybody for tuning in today. Please write down below today's top 3 stories, Hawk Tag's viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.